Alex, thank you so much for coming.
No worries. It's lovely to meet you finally, Paddy.
It's amazing to actually have a well-established, well-thought-after podcast in amongst people who are just new in their journey, people who are only been here for a couple of weeks. How is this for you, being here in this sort of atmosphere?
Honestly, it's simultaneously very like validating and encouraging, but also, if I'm being cynical and honest, it's really useful, like from a business standpoint, because on the one hand, it's great to see everyone sort of supporting and lifting one another up and so on, but it's also, frankly, there aren't many hubs for sort of podcasting in the UK where you can coordinate with multiple people simultaneously, and when you can smoosh this much creative energy into a single space, it tends to accelerate projects a lot. So that thing that's been kicking around, hasn't really happened, starts to like pick up pace basically. So I think they're an incredibly important part of the sort of industry infrastructure, because without them you don't projects take so long that they tend to die on the vine. So if anything, I reckon we could probably do with a bit more of these, if I'm honest.
Yes, the synapses went a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, it sounds silly, but you can, in 5 minutes, you can have more of a conversation than 200 emails. And it's just useful. It's just a very efficient way of doing it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm retro. Maybe I'm about to go back to sending pigeon mail and stuff. Me specifically, I'm Alexander J. Newall, who's the CEO of Rusty Quill Limited. Rusty Quill Limited is a production company and podcast network. We specialise in genre fiction, but we do also work with third parties like Historic Royal Palaces, Did Outliers, and corporate entities, things like that. But what we tend to focus on mostly is the genre fiction side. The shows that we're most known for are the Magnus Archives, Rusty Quill Gaming, and Stella Firma, with the Magnus Archives being a horror series which initially seems to be an anthology. All the stories actually are connected, and it's a narrator-driven one with a full meta plot and extended cast of more than 100. I lose track. It's a lot of logistics. The gaming one is an actual play podcast which started all the way back in 2015, so that was one where we had to explain what an RPG was. Like, episode 1 is us going, so this is what an RPG is, and that's, yeah, the industry's changed a lot since then. A lot more people in the space, which is good. And that one is a homebrew campaign setting that I run, I host, and then we have all of our players obviously communally generating the content, and it's been running for... I should know this off the top of my head, 200 and something episodes, 250 if we include specials, I think. But it's all one campaign with a few smaller specials dotted in. The last show that we are most known for is Stella Firma, which is a sci-fi comedy, because everyone makes a sci-fi comedy show. And this one is about a pair of planetary designers who are basically trapped in a cubicle together in a kind of, it's like a cross between, say, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and like Brazil. As a sort of weird dystopic, fun energy but awful dystopic vibe. I don't know how else to describe it really. So as a network, we prioritize fiction, and when we are working with third parties, we tend to do fiction as well. We're past about 23 million downloads, between 23 and 25. It's hard to pin down because we have multiple feeds and so on. And we are, in the back end, we prioritize providing opportunities to people trying to break into the industry. So that is, as an example, we prioritize remote working so that people with accessibility issues who maybe can't get running work can work with us. We don't have like formal office hours so that people, I don't know, we encourage people who are often excluded. So like a woman on maternity leave, for instance, unfortunately in the industry is often excluded. They're our ideal employee because of the nature of the work and so on. And we try to make sure that that's both at the front end in terms of diversity of casting and scripting, and at the back end where like the majority of our producers are female, which we didn't think is a thing, but apparently in the industry it is. Who knew? What Rusty Quill is now is a company. But what it started out is it's a portfolio piece that got way out of hand. That's what Rusty Quill is. Originally it started with the Rusty Quill Gaming podcast because I saw there was a niche in actual play because no one was really doing it in the UK. There wasn't really much on the scene, and most of what was on the scene was quite reserved in its kind of scope. It was basically people sat around a table talking, but no one was doing SFX, no one was doing high production value. We don't do much in the way of music, but no one was really doing much music either. And it just felt like a missed opportunity. So as a result, what we started to do is we basically built this one, and this was in the early days where I was making all of it. I was running the company, I was finding the artists, I was casting, directing, blah, 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 blah. It went really well. So it seemed sensible to launch another show. Then it went really well, and then it all got a bit big. And at some point I realized that we weren't making a podcast or two, we were a full company and needed to treat as such. So bizarrely, people got a bit shocked by us because we launched a bunch of stuff, and then we kind of seemed to not launch any more shows and just keep making the stuff. And that's because we've spent the best part of the last 2 years just doing the boring stuff like VAT and PAYE schemes and making sure that the pension scheme and just all of the stuff that no one wants to do. And most people with podcasting hit a point and go, I could do all this, or I could just rein it in a bit. And I was fool enough to take a plunge. But at the same time, I don't necessarily encourage people to take that leap unless they're able to. So like, for me, this has resulted in, without exaggeration, a huge number of 100-hour weeks, because I was holding down full-time work and then another full-time job on top. And then once you're starting to do that, obviously it's not great for you. And when it came to the company in terms of sort of building it as a thing, we made sure that the only person on the line was me. We have no creditors. No one has loaned us money. I'm the only person that ever put up money because I wasn't willing to let someone else pay the bill if it went badly. So, I mean, it sounds silly. We basically, for years, have been going, the shoe could drop any moment, so the only person who should put money in is me. And at some point, I've realized the shoe hasn't dropped. In terms of the name, so there's a couple of rules when it comes to naming stuff, which is you want something that people can visually imagine, like an abstract, like the name Concepticon. Yeah, it's good for tech, but it also makes it really rough in terms of people latching onto it. And originally, this is the bane of my life. There's quite a lot of brand ambiguity between Rusty Quill Gaming as a show and Rusty Quill, the company. Because Rusty Quill, although we set the company up straight away, just as in case it went well, the gaming show was our first one. So that meant that the name of the company was largely steered by our actual play podcast. And that was like, what would be a good name for a tavern? That was our logic, was what would be a good name for a tavern so it feels kind of homey and a bit archaic. And then we just genuinely wrote 100 permutations of like Rusty Tankard Quill, where it was just, here's a list of adjectives, here's a list of nouns, run every single combination until the whole cast and everyone in the company went, yeah, that's all right. So I'd love to say it was like an elaborate lightning bolt to the brain, but honestly it was a spreadsheet, as is most of my life at this point. See, that's the thing, is like, for a lot of companies they're saying that they have to reach out and like actively draw people in. We've never really had an issue with that. We're quite careful about our signaling so that when people want to work with us, they know it's a safe place to work. We do paid sabbaticals and pension schemes and, all the good stuff. So we've not really had an issue with attracting a more varied group of people to work with.
Because from experience, it's also, I think it's fair to say that there's actually family members and things like getting involved over the course of time as it progresses things.
So that's an interesting one where normally I would advise against it for a number of reasons. However, I think the one that you're specifically referring to is the Magnus Archives, as our lead, Jonathan Sims, his actual mother and father are both within the show. But one of the main reasons for that is we kind of waived our normal rules on that one, which is that for that one specifically, it was just too delicious to have the two most formative characters on this character to be the real world relatives, combined with the fact that they're both actually excellent storytellers. I have to admit, though, in Stellar Firma we do have a brother pairing, where one of the performers is already in our other shows, and then their brother's basically skilled improviser, so it was a natural pairing. I would say we don't entirely base all of our casting decisions on family. That way madness lies, but at the same time, given the nature of the medium, there's a certain element of flexibility there. And also for Magnus, like I said, we're like well past 100. We're powering towards like 200 guests or something stupid. As a result, there's a bit more leeway in terms of, you can fit a cameo in here and there, and it's not too much of an issue. Yeah, we have a completely international workforce. We have people working for us in, Brazil, US, Japan, and these are all different time zones and so on. So obviously that means that we rely on a lot of digital infrastructure people we're familiar with, Discord, Slack, we use Jira for certain project management software, blah, blah, blah. But more than that, what you have to do is you have to allocate a certain amount of extra person hours towards just communication coordination. So it's an element where the benefit for us is we are able to offer these opportunities to people, and it's like, yeah, we can hire one person full-time, or we can provide a part-time opportunity to 4 people, all of whom need a part-time thing to go in time with, say, for instance, someone is a full-time carer for a family member. Here is a job they can do at the same time as that. But yeah, that means that every time you are subdividing this work, you are increasing your communication load. We rely quite heavily on like digital calls for Discord and Skype and similar, because we find them a bit more efficient. Like I was saying about the live events, it's a good way of replicating that. In terms, though, of the negatives of that, from a personal standpoint, because we bounce between different time zones and most people are working part-time so that they can do other side things, it does mean that I will have meetings normally from 5 p.m. till 9 p.m. every single day of the week, and will work 6 days a week minimum. But in the nicest way possible, that's the CEO gig, and there's an element of careful corporate structure as well, where corporate can be a bit of a dirty word. By corporate, I don't mean like Sony pays our bills. We pay our bills, and it's horrible. But what that actually means is that there are clear lines of communication and structure. So it's like, cool, if you're a performer and you have a question about an HR policy, you can contact your producer. If it's a nature of a grievance, they know to escalate it to their HR manager, who can then bounce it to operations and da-da-da. So it's about making those lines of communication as absolutely crystal clear as possible. It's the danger of with this level of organisation is it can lead to like cultural fossilization, where the idea of change is bad and new people are bad and things should be done the way they were before because that's the way they are. I hate this word because it's overused, but we've been accused of being very agile as a company, because most of the people that we work with are working via mobile. Again, if you're having to and also this other job that you're having to hold down at the same time, it's useful to be able to do stuff on the go. So we've built our entire company to be functional via mobile, although I think we're having to put more work in there, if I'm honest, because I think we underestimated just how much people want to do their entire job on mobile, so we're working to facilitate that more. We spent the last year and a half, 2 years just working on infrastructure, so we got a reputation for being quite standoffish, which wasn't actually the case. It was just that we were looking at our time going, I could do this minor live appearance and generate some goodwill, which is important, do not get me wrong, or pension scheme. So we kept opting for the boring one, which is now all of the pieces are in place, so that we can do another big round of launching new shows and content and all the fun stuff because the infrastructure's in place. But that standoffishness we were made aware of, and we're like, oh, that's not how we want to be seen at all. That's not the goal here. So we, from the end of last year, once the infrastructure was in place, have been making far more effort to sort of do the live shows. We did our first Magnus live show at King's Place as part of London Podcast Festival audio drama. I forgot the exact name. It was a sub-thing of that, and we're going to be doing London Podcast Festival this year. We're looking at more live shows, and this as a space, as an event, there are surprisingly few podcast events in the UK specifically. US, there's a lot, and we do have a major US audience. However, we as a company sat down and went, we could pay for an enormous number of flights and hotels and bounce around the US circuit, or we could pay the people who work with us better. Let's do that. So as it stands here, this is one that's on our doorstep, comparatively speaking. It's only a few hours away from London. It is encouraging audio drama specifically, although it's like a podcast focused one, there's a very heavy audio drama focus. And additionally, I actually attended last year as a plain old punter, just to start scouting out the space. So I wasn't here with a show, I wasn't on any panels, wasn't doing anything at all, and because we hadn't done any live things, no one knew we were there. We were kind of stealthy, because people, funnily enough, in podcasting, very few people recognize your face, which is great when you're a face for radio. I say radio, podcasting. But so we did the rounds last year and went in. This is really well run, and also testament to Jess, and I want to say it's Rock Salt that are organising it, which is that setting up an event of this scale is hard, and the first year tends to be an absolute train wreck beyond repair, and it went astonishingly smoothly. So That's rare, and you notice when that kind of thing happens. So we immediately afterwards were like, your first year, you had the right capacity, a decent turnout, interesting people, we'd like to take part, effectively. And also, we try to make a point of leading by example. So by appearing at places like this, we can help encourage good practice, help encourage good hiring practices, help encourage people to coordinate with one another and collaborate more and make life easier on themselves and that kind of thing. So it was a natural step for us, and we're looking to be taking part in significantly more events like this. I will answer honestly instead of party line, which is, I personally find it very peculiar, but not in a bad way. And that's because, again, while we've been doing all this back-end stuff for the last year and a half and basically disappearing from the public apart from the digital distribution side, we've been made aware that we also have a positive reputation, which is we are making, there's a decent amount of, corporate responsibility. We're caring for the people that work for us. We're trying to do the right thing. And if I am being honest, when this started, that was not the goal. That was a baseline. We didn't set out going, we are going to make the most ethical thing possibly imaginable, and also podcasts. We set out to make podcasts with a baseline of equality and just moral sense. I don't know if that's overstating the point, but as it's grown and people have been, from business interest, certainly people are like, oh, you should definitely, use that as a selling point. I get kind of saddened by the fact that that's treated as a selling point instead of a basic requirement in the space. But the positive side of that is when people look to us as an example or go oh, we're making stuff because of the stuff that you've made and we want to see more things like that, that's great, because that means that other people, we're not alone, other people go, yeah, that is a baseline. Hiring non-abusive people and things like that is a good baseline to have. Exactly, yeah, making sure that the opportunities are there and so on. So, yeah, if I'm honest, every single time I'm like, how did this become our thing? But at the same time, I'm overjoyed that people recognize that if this is going to work as an industry in the long term beyond, it's a fad, it'll pass, which it's been for the last 10 years and more, and funnily enough, it's not passed, the more people latch onto that, I think, the bar for what is required is going to go up, and if it keeps going the way it is, we're going to be able to cast a bit of shade on some other industries, just that little bit, which would be nice. It feels weird that I'm having this conversation, because it's just be a good person. That's all that's required. It's a low bar, but there we are. So for Rusty Quill as a whole, I have to be careful due to NDAs and things like that, so I will have to be a bit vague in certain areas. The most recent thing that we've launched is we're moving into streaming, video streaming via Twitch and so on. The reason being is that we're actually looking to pivot a bit harder into video. We are still going to be making podcast content. We're still going to be making new podcast content. In fact, we have some comparatively exciting plans for this year. I cannot reveal anything on whatsoever. But currently we're looking at generating a lot more video content because it is a useful parallel, and I think that the weird divide where podcasters are like, video is the devil, is peculiar to me. Don't get it. They are compatible mediums as long as you are handling it correctly. So we're looking at doing more of that, more live events, more live appearances, things like that, and more collaborations as well. Again, that idea of us being standoffish is not true. It's just we couldn't do both, and now we can do that. So we're more interested in that. And last but not least is, what can I say? We are looking at launching another major strand to our podcasting. This concludes the sentence. I cannot go into more than that, but this year we're looking at launching something fairly sizable. So obviously all of our shows are available on any podcatcher you've got. The easiest way to find out more about us is www.rustyquill.com, rustyquill.com. That contains links, info, etc. We encourage people as well, if they want to dive in hard, to get involved in our Discord community. We have one of the largest Discord communities in the world for its type, and it's a really good way to find out what we're about in terms of the community. It's a very supportive space. There are fan Discords, which we are not responsible for. They sort themselves out. But there is one space for us, which is, this is our moderated space. This is a space that we know is being handled correctly. We know that you'll be treated well. We know that everyone in there is going to be nice, and if they're not, we'll hit them with the newspaper. So if people want to know more about the community side, I would genuinely say get to the website, and through there get to the Discord, and that's a really good way to know the community.
Alex, thank you so much for taking the time.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, genuinely. Oh, so do I, and I hope you do too.
Thank you.